Welcome to the Three Martini Lunch. Grab a stool next to Greg Columbus of Radio America and Jim Garrity of National Review. Three Martinis coming up.
Hello, happy Tuesday, everybody. It's time for that Three Martini Lunch. I am Chad Benson in for Greg Columbus for the next couple of days. Jim Garrity, as always, is here. We got the good, the bad, the crazy. Let's start with the good. New from Gallup today, Jim. Well, it's good in some ways. Look, let's be real. The reality is nobody likes anybody when it comes to politics anymore as far as parties. But if you're a Republican, you've got the lead in something.
Yeah, no, it's the headline from Gallup today. Neither party well liked, but GOP holds advantage on issues. That might be underselling it. The two issues that jump out the most are 53% of Americans believe the Republican Party will do a better job of keeping the country prosperous over the next few years. Just 39% choose the Democratic Party. And then asked which party will protect the country from international terrorism and military threats. 57% said they had faith in the Republican Party, just 35% in favor of the Democrats. Now, Gallup points out this 14-point lead in keeping the country prosperous. That's up from 10% last year, and it's the widest advantage Republicans have had on this measure since mid-1991. And I'm going to bet that probably was, hangover from the Persian Gulf War. And similar, large margin on national security issues. The Republicans traditionally had an advantage on this starting in 2002. Hey, anything happened in 2001 that might have influenced people's thinking on that? So anyway, so you look at this like, oh, wow, this is great for Republicans. Now, obviously, we're a ways away from Election Day. And, Chad, I look at this like, wow, this is really, the wind is at Republicans' back. They'd have to be complete idiots to blow an opportunity like this, right?
Well, let's be real. They've been known in the past to snatch defeat from the jaws of victory on more than a few occasions. It's usually he who blows it rather than he who wins it.
Indeed. So look, Republicans, you don't have a lot of excuses. Although, again, there is similar numbers, particularly on the economy and inflation, gas prices, stuff like that, back in the lead up to the polls of 2022. And the midterms did not go great for Republicans. Yes, they won the House, but by a small margin. We'll be talking about that a little bit more in the next martini. And, a lot of races that they thought they were going to win, they did not win. Exit polls indicated Americans were down on the economy. They were down on Biden. They were down on everything, but they didn't like the Republican candidates better. So learn your lessons, Republicans.
But do you think they will learn the lesson? That's something I always wonder about when it comes to anybody in politics, because I don't think they understand what common sense and reality is. So, Jim, we've given everybody the good. Let's give the bad. And it's Matt Gaetz and his motion. It's going to get rid of McCarthy. It's time McCarthy. He's been around too long, Jim. He's been around way too long. It's time for him to go. Matt is stepping up and saving everybody because I just heard him a little while ago said that he doesn't want to be on the board of directors if America is doomed. I feel like this is already doomed.
Well, Chad, so here's the thing. If you could point to the appropriations process that Matt Gaetz and his allies had cooperated with, trying to pass bills that reduce spending and, put the conservative priorities towards the front. If they had done that and McCarthy had still botched it, okay, you could make an argument that McCarthy should go. If Gaetz and his allies had helped cooperate to pass a continuing resolution to give McCarthy some more leverage in this recent government shutdown fight, you could make it, and he'd still fumbled it. You could say, okay, maybe it's time for some new leadership here. I would point out, if you had, say, 218 votes in that conference for some other Republican to be the Speaker of the House, then this would be a very different conversation. They don't have that. In fact, of the 20-some Republicans who held out against McCarthy pretty well into the process, like the first 9 votes, I'm not sure there's a consensus candidate amongst those 21. You can't beat something with nothing. So if any of those things were true, I think Gaetz would have a stronger argument. He doesn't have any of those things. He says he knows, or at least early in the week, he was saying he expects it to fail. What's the point of this? And then the second thing is that he says, even if it fails, he's going to try it again. And it's kind of like, I am going to slang my head against that brick wall as hard as I can. And I know it's not going to break the wall. In fact, it's going to do a lot of damage to my head. But I am going to slam my head against the wall even harder a second time just to show how determined I am. Chad, am I wrong on this?
Here's my frustration with Matt Gaetz and a lot of this other chaos that goes on in certain portions of the Republican Party is it is all about being, as I like to coin the phrase, a celebrity. It's all about identity for themselves, showing the tribe that they are here 100%. And this is all that matters. It's not about whether or not it's good for the people, the party, any of that stuff. It's about whether or not it's good for a handful of people. And Matt Gaetz is leading the charge. You just said it. Let's just say, for the sake of argument, you want to oust him and you've got enough votes, because who knows how many votes you're going to have, whatever. You don't need that many to get rid of him. Steve Scalise, he already said he doesn't want the job. And quite frankly, because of his health issues, he's not in a position to have it. Jim Jordan, are you really going to get that many? And the Democrats, if you send him over and he needs the Democrats to bail him out, that means the Democrats are going to get something. So now you've pushed him further away and they're going to get something. Who wins in this?
Arguably, you could say the Democrats. Now, as of earlier this week, there were Democrats who were saying, I want nothing to do with Matt Gaetz. I'm not on board with this. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez jumped on board. So good news, conservatives. Matt Gaetz and AOC are working together to get rid of McCarthy. I'm skeptical that this works out, that this will lead to McCarthy's departure. By the time people hear this podcast, it's possible that this will already be resolved. But again, I keep coming around to this question of, if you don't want McCarthy, like, most of the problems surrounding McCarthy are problems of the circumstances. He's got a very narrow House majority. If he had 240 seats, it'd be a very different circumstance. If Republicans held the Senate, it would be a very different circumstance. If we had a Republican in the White House, it would be a very different circumstance. McCarthy doesn't have any of those things. And in fact, his House majority, thin as it is built on a bunch of House Republicans who are in districts that Biden won, effectively swing districts. So they can't vote for just about anything. They can't take votes that are going to play badly in, those nice suburbs of Brian Fitzpatrick in Bucks County, Pennsylvania. They got to come across as reasonable and pragmatic. They can't just pound the table and do guest gigs on Newsmax the way Gaetz does. Not that there's anything wrong with guest hosts, Chad. I want you to know. But just like, I don't see any end game here. I don't see any plan to actually get them, to a position that's better, unless the whole plan is just to get more attention for Matt Gaetz so he can run for Florida governor in 2026. Which is
what it's always about, isn't it? Anymore, politics is, hey, enough about you, more about me and how this can benefit me, which should drive everybody crazy. And I will say, have we not learned that McCarthy's willing to do anything? He wants that gig. That, first of all, says that you're already not right in the head. Secondly, he's a survivor. He's kind of like a bit of a political cockroach. The guy seems to get through, which should also say a lot to people. He's willing to do anything to get what he needs.
Yeah, look, he wants the job and nobody else does. Like, that's kind of, prerequisite number one there.
Absolutely. Man, this talk's making me hungry, Jim.
It is, and if you're looking for something you can sink your teeth into, don't sink your teeth into congressional controversies. Sink your teeth into meat from Moink. Do you know that 60% of U.S. pork production comes from one company, which is owned by the Chinese, and their hogs are given something called ractopamine, which is banned in 160 countries, including China? Like, if something's too toxic for China, should we be having it in our stuff? I'm not so sure. Yet you find it in your grocery aisle every day. Now, there's a better way, and I'd like to tell you about Moink, which comes from Moo plus Oink. Now, there's a bunch of this stuff in my freezer, and it's very easy to prepare. You just defrost it, throw it on the grill, cooks up nice, flavorful. I love it. I think you will too, and you got to join the Moink movement today. You can keep American farming by signing up at moinkbox.com/martini right now, and listeners of the show will get free ground beef for a year. That's 1 year of the best ground beef you'll ever taste, but it's only for a limited time. Spelled MOINK, box.com/martini. One last time, that's moinkbox.com/martini.
We've given you good, we've given you the bad, now the crazy, and I have to be honest, maybe I'm crazy, but I agree with Trump on this 100%. Let's get rid of future debates, because that last debate was a debacle, and I don't need 7 or 8 people on a stage yelling over each other.
So I'm going to disagree with you, Chad, although I'm going to say I see where you're coming from, which is just, when you have a debate that doesn't go well, people start wondering what the value in them is. But I don't think the fact that you have flaws in, a way a debate is managed means that there's no point to debates. I think if you want to be the nominee of the Republican Party, or the Democratic Party for that matter, I noticed Joe Biden's not showing up to debate RFK Jr. or Marianne Williamson or anybody else. I think if you want to be the nominee, you should be able to stand up there and debate and make the case for yourself, and not just in a Q&A or something like that. I think it's good to interact with other members of your party and defend your record. I also think it's good when you can point out, here's what I can do that they can't, or here's what I have done that they can't, or here's why this person should not be the nominee. I don't believe, so there's an argument of, look, is Donald Trump ahead by a lot? Yes. But I point out, nobody votes until January 15th, right? It's early October. Now, I know that you've had, probably Halloween decorations in your store for 2 months, and it gets a little tougher. It's a little tougher to tell what time is, but really 3 or 4 months before that, we're going to end. We're just like, we're going to not have a primary. We're not going to have debates. We're going to have a coronation. Come on. Whether or not Trump is the overwhelmingly likely person, people deserve a vote. People deserve a chance. And if you're going to have that, I think you deserve the chance to hear from the candidates. You never know what's going to happen. Maybe you're going to have a really bad moment. Maybe a really good moment. People can also go into these debates and stars can be born. People can win Fox News show gigs. There's a point to having these things. And just because you didn't I completely agree with you on the crosstalk. I completely agree with you. I think that we can get rid of the 1% to 2% candidates. I think we only really need, at most, 4 or 5 candidates anymore. But it's ridiculous to say in October, this primary is over and nobody should bother debating anymore.
You know what I would like to see, and this is just me living in a world where they said, Chad, you got to be king for a day when it comes to this stuff. One-on-one seems to be okay. I'd rather see them just sit down. Each of them has 30 minutes where they just have a conversation with each other. They have questions for each other and how they're going to do things. Then maybe, some questions from an audience, like where people have submitted it, and then maybe just the 30 minutes of a regular debate. The problem is we're still at this bizarre point, Jim, where we think everybody who's got 0.05%, Chris Christie and the Burghams who's bought his way in, have the opportunity to be up there, and they shouldn't be. They're not. That's like me going today saying I have the opportunity to pitch in one of the Major League Baseball playoff games. That's not realistic. I have no chance, and neither do they. So I feel like it clogs up any real conversation of getting to the point where Trump would have to debate Nikki Haley or Ron DeSantis or somebody. It's just too much.
For several cycles now, we have seen the primary presidential candidate field grow. 2008, 2012, 2016, 2020 on the Democratic side, to the point where, the last 2 cycles, the out party has had too many candidates to have on one stage. Now, they managed to do it for this one. I suppose you could say there was a slight decline. We weren't in the teens or 20s. But we still had Hutchinson up there for one. I think, I don't mind the country getting a chance to meet Doug Burgum. He met the criteria set by the RNC. He was giving people gift cards and, in exchange for a $1 donation in order to make it, but fine. Okay. I don't mind early in the process having a debate or two in which these lesser known candidates get a chance to go up there. And who knows? Sometimes a star will be born. You will see, Ramaswamy, as much as I have big disagreements with this guy, I think has made the most of his moments, at least in the first debate, maybe not so much in the second debate. A bunch of these other guys, look, every cycle we've seen candidates who I don't think of myself as being clairvoyant or a genius or something like that. You just tell that what they're offering is pretty much the same thing every other candidate is offering. They really think that they're unbelievably charismatic. They really think that their canned, rehearsed line is going to kill. It doesn't. And they kind of walk around in this delusion, like, I know I'm going to be president because everywhere I go, people stop me and they tell me I should run for president at the airport and when I'm at the grocery store. Well, one, I think those people are being nice. Alternately, you don't notice all the people who aren't coming up to you and saying, yes, you should run for president, because everybody else at the airport, they don't care who you are. Nobody's heard of you. And I think before you're running, if you want to run for president of the United States, people should have heard of you. You should do things that are significant enough that people have noticed. Maybe it's tougher when you're governor of North Dakota. I think Doug Burgum's a good guy. I think he could, he'd probably do a fine job as president, but this is not the minor leagues. This is, and we've seen, you could argue that maybe this is the case with DeSantis, governors who think they know how to handle a tough media environment, and then they choose to run for president, and they just get clobbered because the media environment is much, much tougher than what you find in most state capitals. So, look, I'm open to the arguments that we don't need as many people on these debate stages, but I think the idea of saying, nope, that's it, we're all canceled, would be kind of ridiculous, and it would indicate that this is now the Republican Party is really a dictatorial or monarchical situation rather than a traditional American political party.
Yeah, no. Look, I agree on that. I just think that, like I said, the 7 to 10 people is just too many, and we've got to figure. It is kind of a silly way to come up with stuff. Everybody stands behind a podium and argues something, And I also blame a bit on that on Fox, because that whole like, who would you vote off the island thing? It's so ridiculous. And here, Jim, I'm going to ask you an honest question here. Why is everything that they ask for the Republicans all based on the progressive side of things? It's never based on a conservative side. So my friends and I have talked about this in the past. They've said everything's based on, well, what are you going to do to make sure that the DACA recipients get to stay in the country, rather than what are you going to do to make sure that we're going to fix our borders?
Yeah. It is not surprising that the English language cable news networks and broadcast networks want to have a Spanish language partner. The problem is that the people who are the anchors representing the Spanish language news networks very often come at it from a leftward perspective, and that comes through very clearly in the questioning. But I'm a fan and friend of Dana Perino, so I'm going to make a half-hearted defense of the voted off the island question. That is the dynamic right now in this race, right? That there's Donald Trump, who's got at least half, a little bit more than half right now, and you've got 6 or 7, however many you want to count, guys trying to not be the not Trump option. Well, if the non-Trump vote is split 6 or 7 ways, Trump's going to win easily. If it's split even 2 or 3 ways, it's going to be so. The question is there a person on that stage the other night who can unite the non-Trump vote? And if he's got to start somewhere, and it would be interesting to see. I also have a sneaking suspicion. She hasn't told me this. I don't know it's for certain. I have a sneaking suspicion that if you'd loaded them up with truth serum and they all had to answer, 6 people on that stage would have written Ramaswamy.
Yeah. Except for Christie, because he wrote Trump.
Yeah, which is kind of a cheat and a cop-out. But by the way, if you're ever in that situation, Stuart Varney's like, I noticed you're writing something. In my mind, the best comeback is, I was writing your name, Stu.
Yeah. No, and I thought Dana did semi-okay in the chaotic thing. I just thought the question was very much reality television, and we got to do better. Yeah. I think as a nation,
voted off the island was perhaps too cutesy. If you could say, look, is there anybody who you think should be call it quits and move on? Who should it be? That probably cop out by saying all of them, but you get the idea.
Yeah. Well, there should have been all of them, as we all know at this point, minus the 2, maybe 2. 2, absolutely. It's Jim Garrity. I'm Chad Benson. Follow me at Chad Benson Show. Greg back in a few days, so you'll have me for the next couple of days. Jim, people want to reach out to you and follow you. What do they do?
I am at Jim Garrity on what used to be known as Twitter, much like Prince was the artist formerly known as Prince, on X, if that's what they're calling it these days. Also, National Review. I write the Morning Jolt every weekday, and I write for the Washington Post as well.
Fantastic. Good being here, and we'll do it again tomorrow.
See you tomorrow, Chad.
Hey, this is Todd Herman, host of The Todd Herman Show. You might have heard me on Rush Limbaugh's show, where I was a regular fill-in for about 8 years. I now do a show out of the high mountains of free America because, I got exiled from Seattle. Perverse incentives. They paid hospitals up to $600,000 to kill people with the COVID hospital protocols, and they incentivized FBI agents to invent cases of white supremacist domestic terror happening in school board meetings. Check out The Todd Herman Show every day on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts.